Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the bill regarding the protection of children that we discussed yesterday.
Representative Fine, having explained this bill, are there any amendments?
None in the desk, Mr. Speaker.
Members, listen up. We're going into structured debate on Senate Bill 1438. Debate will be limited to 30 minutes per side in 15-minute increments. Total debate time not to exceed 60 minutes. Representative Benjamin, you're recognized to begin the debate, and the clerk will start the clock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to yield the floor to Representative Bracy Davis.
Representative Bracy Davis, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is a blatant attack on free expression, parental rights, and choice. A choice that you attack today and attend tomorrow. Drag performances, or as you have disguised in this bill, live performances, is arts and culture. The same arts and culture that bring millions of people and dollars to this state. As always, I have many questions. What are you afraid of? What is it about drag queens that terrify you? Pray tell, why are we censoring artistic expression? While it is drag today, will it be the Philharmonic or a marching band tomorrow? How are we differentiating what type of artistic expression is acceptable? The Broadway musical, Mrs. Doubtfire, is about to start touring around the country. This play, as you know, is based on a cherished, family-friendly movie where the beloved Robin Williams, dressed in drag, becomes a nanny for his children. In case you forgot, Mrs. Doubtfire wears prosthetics. When this show is presented here in the Sunshine State, will a venue's liquor license be compromised? Will children not be able to see this show? What about Hairspray, Matilda, Kinky Boots, Rent, Chicago? How about Peter Pan? Will these incredibly popular plays and musicals be banned in the free state of Florida? Or are we just targeting smaller performances, the starving artists, the people who entertain us, bring us life, sing us happy, and dance us until our soul cries? If you don't want your kids to see one of these shows, newsflash, don't take them. This body has insisted Florida parents should have every right to do just that. Parent. Every parent has the right to determine what is appropriate for their child. That is not the government's job. So let's stay consistent. Or are we just consistently inconsistent? A walking oxymoron, a theater of hypocrisy, a chorus line of duplicity. While I know many in this chamber are content to ignore and taunt the back row, please be assured that we and our families represent the front row of many of these venues and audiences that you are trying to scare. So while I won't drag this debate out any longer, let's not drag our families out of the theaters, the festivals, or restaurants that we have chosen to be in. I know this chamber has shown quite the concern for impersonation. Well, right now we are impersonating democracy. So for all of the legislators that are trying to push their way inside of the theater, it's a packed house. Every seat has been sold, and there's no room for government interference. So colleagues, please join me in voting down on this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Benjamin, see if you can top that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, but I will yield that to Representative Nixon.
Representative Nixon, see if you can top that.
I can't, Mr. Speaker, I can't. Shout out to Rep. Bracy Davis. So there's a few issues with this bill, and it's the lack of definitions. So one of the key points the bill sponsor made was that this bill would not apply to parents. I believe that that was wrong. Your premise for the statement was the word admit in the bill. Admit is not defined in the bill. And taking tickets was one of the things that you kept saying over and over again. But however, as you're aware, at some festivals and the like, there is not necessarily a ticket booth for a person taking tickets. They are in parks, downtown areas where people come and go as they please. The definition for admit is to allow someone to enter a place. So it can be easily argued that only a parent can allow their child to enter a park or a place, especially an event happening downtown or again at a park. So the person who admitted that child is the parent, and that would be liable, and we would be liable under this bill. Again, as you stated earlier, drafting matters, and this bill goes against parental rights. The second point is the definition adult live performance on line 98. The definition's flawed. It doesn't attribute the live portion to the performance, only to the audience. It says any show, exhibition, or other presentation in front of a live audience. Audiences are live because, dead audience can't observe anything. So other presentations could literally mean anything, to include things like movie theaters. So taking a child to a R-rated movie falls under adult live performances under this bill's definition. Shows or other presentations, that type of thing. Again, it's about intent versus impact. And so I am worried that this could further impact people's parental rights. Parents who know what's best for their children know whether or not their child is able to go see a PG-13 movie or whatever. And also it could hold the theaters liable to losing their licensing, and it can give them fines. And it's just a bad bill that we know, again, is just trying to create a culture war, trying to specifically erase a community, which is what the bill sponsor said. Hey, we did not come here to do that. I don't know about y'all members, but I have people calling me not about this type of legislation. I have people calling me because they're concerned that they can no longer afford their rent. They can no longer afford the insurance premiums on their homes. And this is going to just, again, cause our best and brightest to leave. With that, y'all, I'll be short and sweet. Just vote this bill down. Thank you.
Representative Benjamin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield time now to Representative Escamani.
Representative Escamani, you're recognized for debate.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, members, it was made clear that there is no clear definition of what a state community standard is. We can speculate on what that could mean. Could it mean that we poll Floridians if they think this specific performance is appropriate? Is it pulling random people off the street and asking them? Or is it what the governor says or what the majority party says? There was no clear definition provided to us on what a statewide community standard is. And yes, this bill incorporates the Miller test, but it edits it. It conforms the Miller test to the bill sponsor's preference and provides no clear definition of how it would actually be applied. I also want to mention that we already have restrictions on obscenity. In fact, there's an entire chapter on obscenity, chapter 847. You can look it up. And there's even more strict local ordinances when it comes to sexually oriented businesses. So if those are your concerns, please know those concerns are met. But I also want to stress, as my colleagues already emphasized, our concerns on the what feels like an attempt to specifically censor and target types of art, political expression that focuses on marginalized communities. And I know much of our conversation on the back rows has been the LGBTQ plus community, but let's be clear, this could also impact Beyonce, who on stage could do simulated nudity behind a curtain. This could impact the Taylor Swift concert that many folks already went to this past weekend. It could impact any live performance in the theater, from Kinky Boots to everything else. And so the impact goes way beyond just drag performances, but of course, that is a major area of concern. But one of the distinctions that has also been ignored is that sexually oriented businesses and the concerns that many members of Front Row have brought up are designed to arouse. Drag shows are not designed to arouse. And if you're experiencing arousal, that is a personal matter, not a state matter. And so to that point, the way this bill is written is that it's so broad that it can be interpreted to censor anything you want. And that is not government's duty to do so. We have a First Amendment that is fundamental to who we are as a country and as a state. And to legislate because we find some performances not to our liking, not to our taste, then don't go to it. It is that easy. And of course, I offered an amendment yesterday to emphasize parental rights, to make sure parents can have a choice at least for all the reasons I described yesterday. And that was also voted down. So this is not about your concerns for parental oversight. This is purely your efforts to eliminate any type of expression when it comes to marginalized communities because for some reason you find that offensive. And again, if you find it offensive, don't go. And as I wrap up, I just want to leave with this, that we're talking about people's livelihoods. You know, in my district, we are home to amazing artists. My community actually is the art district. We have the largest performing arts center in Central Florida, and we have small nonprofit organizations, we have pop-ups, we have drag shows. And I invite you to come to my district and let's have some fun on a Sunday brunch with our queens and kings. I would love to bring you there because I think you'll understand that drag is joy. Drag is happiness. Drag is fashion. Drag is glorious. Drag is lip syncing. Drag is life for so many of our communities. It is what saves people from taking their own lives because they can have an expression that allows them to tell their story. And I just don't understand why you want to stop that. And so, members, please join us in supporting freedom of expression. Join us supporting parents' rights. Join us in opposing this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Benjamin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield to our leader, Representative Driscoll.
Representative Driscoll, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Some of you maybe heard about the 16th century, sometimes they call him a prophet or predictor. His name was Nostradamus. And he would make these predictions about what calamities were to come in the future. He would mention earthquakes, he would mention famine, he would mention fiery balls falling down from the sky, war, etc. He never, not one time, mentioned drag queens. We have a federal website. It's called ready.gov. I encourage you to check it out. It's all about disaster preparedness. They talk about all sorts of hazards, avalanche, biohazard exposure, cybersecurity, drought, earthquakes, explosions, extreme heats, flood. As I can go on, they never, not one time, mention drag queens. I just don't understand when drag queens became enemy number one. During Tampa Pride weekend, I had the honor of meeting a transgender woman named Angelique. Beautiful, beautiful soul. Beautiful inside and out. And she's a drag performer in Tampa. And she never really engaged much in the political process until she learned more about what was happening in Tallahassee. And she's come and she's brought her community with her and has testified in committee after committee saying, please don't do this. This is my livelihood. I don't know why we would take away her livelihood and those in her community. And it feels to me, I've been listening, and it feels to me like perhaps proponents of the bill are working with a specific vision of tell you that's far from what happens at every show. I can remember in law school going to drag queen bingo. It was a great, fun experience that my classmates and I loved to do. We already have laws to protect children from inappropriate content, so this isn't necessary. It's already illegal for a kid to go to a strip club. It's illegal for a parent to take their kids to an R-rated movie, to Hooters. I know y'all are not going to sit up here and tell me you haven't had those wings. Okay, to many other events. So that's the right of the parent to decide what's best and appropriate for their children. And yet I'm very concerned that we're in a time where our state government feels like it needs to look over the shoulder of every parent and now even look over the shoulder of adults. It's wrong. We've heard that there is a great evil among us today, and I agree, but I take a different perspective on it. I actually think it's hubris. I think we have to be careful, and we can all suffer from it, self-included, when we feel that we know better than someone's own lived experience when they tell us about it, when we don't really know what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. But when we have many, many members of the community in fabulous shoes come and tell us exactly what this bill would do to their community, I believe it's something we cannot ignore. And this is a bell we can't unring. Even though the plain text of the bill may not say drag before anybody tells me that, there's a greater context happening here, and we all know it. So please vote down on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Having never been to Hoosier
creates a dragnet for businesses because performers in these adult live entertainment acts, they're going to bring their kids to work if they can't afford daycare. And so what happens when the police from the 1953 Fahrenheit 451 movie show up and they're just there to monitor, to try to find out if somebody has their child there? So this is a bad bill. It's going to punish businesses $5,000, $10,000 for something as simple as a employee bringing their child to work, an underage child to work because they can't afford daycare. So thank you. I'm down on this bill.
Representative Benjamin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now yield time to Representative Campbell.
Representative Campbell, you're recognized in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, let's call a spade a spade. This is an attack on the LGBT plus community, on free speech, and on Floridians. This bill casts a wide net using vague language to criminalize a whole group of people for a crime that does not exist. The crime of celebrating their existence, the crime of having pride in their existence. And so while this rhetoric claims that this bill is to protect children, it would still allow children to be knowingly admitted into American Pie or R-rated film with pornographic content. And yet the bill doesn't address that. And why is that? It's simple. This bill has never been about protecting children from what communities consider to be patently offensive. It has always been about bearing children from the government, from what the government and some members of this legislature decide is patently offensive. Right now, they're going after the LGBTQ plus community. For those watching, they will come after you when it's in their interest, because today, with this bill, we are saying that the government has the power to decide what speech, performance, or identity is worthy. And that is sad. That is a sad day in Florida. I have the honor and the pleasure to represent 5 cities. One of them I would deem to say is one of the happiest places out there, Wilton Manors. And I encourage members, if you have the opportunity, to come over to Wilton Manors over there on Wilton Manor Drive, and you'll see it outshines Disney World a mile away as being the happiest place in Florida. And so I say this to the LGBTQ plus community. I stand with you because you deserve to exist. You are loved and you are wanted. And though they are those here who believe otherwise, no act of this legislature can change that.
Representative Benjamin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now yield time to Representative Joseph.
Representative Joseph, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we heard a lot about what the bill doesn't do. Let's talk about what the bill does do. The bill focuses on levying the power of the state to advance a homophobic agenda. So while my colleague talked about how it won't prevent you from putting makeup on your face with your son, or it won't prevent you from dressing up, what it will do is it will make it harder for those establishments to provide a venue for you to enjoy the things and the performances that you claim to love, that you claim not to be affected. Right now, so looking at the staff analysis that we were provided for this bill in Commerce for the House Companion Bill, at that time, we had recent news stories of at least 3 businesses with their liquor licenses in the state currently being administratively charged by DBPR with violating public nuisance, lewd activity, and disorderly conduct laws. And I highlight those because while the bill text may not make plain what it's designed to do, we know what it's designed to do. All of those cases are still pending. And in each of those cases, whether they're from Miami-Dade or wherever in Florida, this is because they didn't have enough of a legal thing to hang their hat on. So we need to come up with this legislation for them to continue bully businesses by revoking their licenses and doing all kinds of things to eliminate the spaces within which these people who are also Floridians, also worthy of respect, also deserving of being able to express themselves artistically or otherwise, it's eliminating those venues. That's what this bill does. Parents, not parents, it's irrelevant because they don't care what the parents actually think. And they're not focusing on you. They're focusing on the business. So it's targeting the businesses. In Miami-Dade County, the Hyatt lost its liquor license in this roundup. Let that sink in. So I rise as a member of the Miami-Dade delegation to also point out, and putting on my legal hat, that another thing that was done with this legislation is that we are changing the legal standards of what constitutes lewd and lascivious behavior in analyzing the impact on the First Amendment. This is a First Amendment issue. And when analyzing this from time immemorial, it is well settled law that you look at the mores of that local community. This bill changes it from that analysis of that local community and makes you focus on a statewide standard. Why, pray tell, do you think the bill sponsor would require that? Because if we were looking at a local standard, most of the stuff would probably fail because our local communities get it. And there was a time where members of the other party used to be arguing for a local rule. But I guess that shifts and changes depending on who's in charge. Are we in charge? We want it to be at this level. Are we in charge? We want it to be at that level. I'm just asking for some intellectual consistency, some legal honesty.
Representative Joseph, time has expired. Please wrap up your debate.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, we can say whatever we want to say and hide about protecting kids, but this is about punishing businesses that dare ally themselves with a vulnerable community that's on the hit list.
Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please recognize Representative Bankston in debate?
Representative Bankston in debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would challenge you all to go and press your page button right now. But if you do, it's going to be a little bit before you get any drink of water because they're not in the room. There's a reason they're not in the room right now because we're dealing with adult issues. Our children are in a development stage and it's important for us to make sure to protect them. When recently we saw a biological male straddling over an underage girl and placing his genitals upon her chest. This is not art. That's disgusting. We're stealing the innocence of our children, and this is why we're here. This is what this is about. It's not to stop adults from doing what adults decide to do. This is about protecting our children. There are those that will chew you out if you out the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus to their kids. But if you dare to try and say there are things that are inappropriate, then you're crossing the line. This is wrong. This bill is designed to protect children. Even Hollywood knows there should be ratings for entertainment because there are just things that are inappropriate for children. They're still growing, they're still developing, and we have a duty to protect them. Let kids be kids. Protect them from losing their innocence. This is a good bill. Vote up on this bill.
Members, please join me in welcoming back to the Florida House current Senator and former member Lori Berman. Welcome to the Florida House. Representative Grant, you're recognized.
Waive our time.
Thank you. Having waived his time in totality? Wow, we're done with that. Representative Fine, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think I got this. There is evil in this world, and we face it here today. This bill deals with children. There's not one single provision, there's not one word, there's not one line that affects the entertainment that adults can do for adults. I wouldn't vote for that bill let alone support it. We heard that this bill is about the right to decide what is appropriate for your child. I got news for parents. You don't have that right today. You can't decide to not send your kid to school. You can't decide to starve them. You can't send your kid to an NC-17 movie. For all those folks who said there's no standards in the movie business, there's all kinds of decisions. There's all sorts of guardrails that the government has put in. Yes, we believe in school choice. That's not the same as taking your child to a sex show. We heard a big, long list of problems that we have in Florida, and drag queens wasn't on it. Well, guess where else drag queens aren't mentioned in a big, long list? In the 20-line definition of this bill. If I'd wanted a bill to ban drag shows, I could have run that bill. A bill to ban drag shows. But we came up with a Supreme Court developed test that requires that you meet 4 separate standards. It's not that how you're dressed. It's not that you have prosthetic breasts or whatever it is. You had to do all of these things. The standard is very high. As Dr. Rudman put, with, by the way, the best tie we will see on the floor all session. But what's amazing to me is we only heard about one kind of entertainment that supposedly over and over and over again meets this definition. Well, I'm going to quote from someone who actually had drag performers. I had the privilege of studying his work when I was in college. His name was Shakespeare, and he used them. And he had a quote, that the lady doth protest too much. That's what I took away. People said, if you don't like this, don't take your kids to this. Part of the reason that we run this bill is because these are not simply happening in places that are ticketed, in places that are private. As one of the members in the back row pointed out, these are happening in parks, these are happening in streets, these are happening in downtowns. And I learned this when members in my community called me and said they were going to the library, they were going to a restaurant, they were going to the post office, they were walking through a downtown that was closed, and they saw exactly the sort of behavior that this bill would not allow children to see. Now, if that was not enough, I'll give you one more example. There is evil in this world, and we face it here today. It's not enough to do this to target children. I encourage you to go take a look at a group called Drag Syndrome. We're not just going to target children, we're going to target children with Down syndrome and make them performers and parade them in front of people. There is evil in this world, and that is it. We're going to stop this here today. I'm going to talk in my closing speech on my other bill. You're going to get to see something you'll never see again, a speech that I wrote in advance. These are all off the top of my head because there are certain things I'm going to say. But I will close this by saying this. The right question is not, why do I want to stop children from going to these kinds of events? The question is, why are they so determined to do it to children? This is a good bill. Protect our children. Vote for it. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Representative Fine. Having closed on his bill, the question now recurs on final passage of SB 1438. The clerk will unlock the machine and the members will proceed to vote. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? The clerk will lock the machine and announce the vote.
82 yeas, 32 nays, Mr. Speaker.
Show the bill passes. Read the next bill.
By Commerce Committee, Regulatory Reform and Economic Development Subcommittee, and Representative Maggard and others. CS for House Bill 89, a bill to be entitled An Act Relating to Building Construction.
Thank you, members. Before we get to the next bill, we're going to take up a couple of announcements. Representative Killebrew, you are recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the West Gallery this afternoon, I'd like to welcome our Winter Haven Chamber President, Sarah Beth White, along with the leadership, Winter Haven Group 42. Welcome to the Florida House.
Welcome to the Florida House. Representative Basabe for recognition.
Speaker, I'd like to recognize Madison Flanagan. She's an 8th grader that lives in my district. Because of the early auditory oral services, she's able to listen and speak to communicate. Our legislature has been tremendously supportive of this program. She leads an exciting life. She plays soccer, volleyball, lacrosse. She's, participates in the Model UN. But most importantly, she's here to advocate